The winter sky wept ash over the village of Black Barrow. Embers carried on the wind like dying fireflies, tiny harbingers of the devastation sweeping through the valley. Smoke towered in the distance, a black column marking where neighboring Ravenhill had stood just hours before. Ilara Thorne's hands trembled as she finished securing the leather straps of her father's old hunting pack. 20 summers of life had not prepared her for this night. The council bell rang frantically in the village square, its desperate peals cutting through the panicked shouts of families gathering their meager possessions. "They're coming, Ilara." Her younger brother Finn stood in the doorway, his face smudged with dirt and fear. At 14, his limbs were still coltish, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Mother says we must leave now." Ilara nodded, swallowing hard against the knot in her throat. "The root cellar. Did you hide the provisions like I asked?" "Yes, but why bother? Everyone says it's him, the Blood King. He doesn't leave survivors." The name hung in the air like poison. King Matthias Blackthorn, ruler of the Northern Territories, the vampire monarch whose thirst for conquest was matched only by his thirst for blood. For decades, his existence had been little more than frightening bedtime stories told to misbehaving children in their remote valley. Until 3 nights ago, when East Meadow fell, then Woodland Crest, now Ravenhill. "We don't know that," Ilara said, though the lie felt hollow even to her own ears. She grabbed her father's old bow and the quiver of arrows she'd been fletching that very morning. A futile gesture, perhaps. What could arrows do against creatures who had already died once? But it steadied her. Outside, winter had come early to Black Barrow. Frost glittered on the thatched roofs of cottages, catching the orange glow of distant flames. The narrow streets teemed with villagers, some pulling carts laden with possessions, others carrying only what their arms could hold. Children cried. Elders shuffled along, supported by sons and daughters. At the edge of the crowd, Ilara spotted her mother, Clara, her silver-streaked dark hair coming loose from its tight bun as she directed younger families toward the forest path. "Mother!" Finn called, waving. Clara turned, relief flooding her tired face as she hurried toward them. "Thank the gods! We need to join the others heading for the caves." She pulled Ilara close, her whisper urgent against her daughter's ear. "The council has voted to stand and fight. Your Uncle Thomas leads them." "What? That's madness," Ilara hissed back. "If the rumors are true, that's why we must go. Now!" Clara's eyes darted to the North Road. "Finn, help Mrs. Hadley with her twins. Ilara, bring the rear guard. Make sure no one falls behind." Before Ilara could protest, a new sound cut through the night. The thunder of hooves, accompanied by an inhuman shrieking that raised gooseflesh along her arms. The crowd in the village square froze, then erupted into chaos. "They're here!" someone screamed. "The Blood King's riders!" Ilara's body moved before her mind could catch up, pushing Finn toward their mother. "Go! I'll help the stragglers!" "Ilara, no!" Clara reached for her daughter. "I'll be right behind you," Ilara promised, already turning away, moving against the flow of bodies fleeing toward the southern path. The first of the Vampire King's forces crested the North Hill, their horses unnaturally pale under the moon's glow, eyes gleaming red as burning coals. Their riders wore armor that seemed to absorb the light around them, making them appear as living shadows cutting through the night. At their center rode a figure taller than the rest, his mount a massive stallion, the color of midnight. Even from this distance, Ilara could see the crown of twisted metal upon his head. The Blood King himself had come for Black Barrow. Ilara's heart thundered in her chest as she ran toward the eastern cottages, where smoke was already beginning to rise. An old woman stumbled from a doorway, clutching a small wooden box to her chest. "Gila Mater!" Ilara called, recognizing the village's medicine woman. She caught the elder's arm, supporting her weight. "The evacuation is through the south wood. Come, quickly." "My herbs," the old woman gasped. "The knowledge of generations. I couldn't leave them. They'll be of no use if you're dead." Ilara said, guiding her along the narrow alley that would lead them away from the advancing riders. Behind them, the first screams began. Villagers who had chosen to stand their ground or had been too slow to flee. They had nearly reached the southern path when a shadow detached itself from the darkness ahead. Ilara froze, pushing Marta behind her as she nocked an arrow. The figure moved with unnatural grace, stepping into a shaft of moonlight to reveal a woman with skin like polished alabaster and eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. "How touching," the vampire purred, her accent thick and foreign to Ilara's ears. "The brave little shepherdess protects her flock." Ilara released her arrow. It struck true, embedding itself in the creature's shoulder, but the vampire merely looked down at it with mild annoyance before plucking it out like a bothersome splinter. "Iron-tipped, but not blessed," she said, sniffing the arrowhead. "You country folk never learn the proper ways to kill our kind." "Run!" Ilara shouted to Marta, knocking another arrow. The old healer hobbled away as Ilara loosed a second shot, this time aiming for the vampire's eye. The creature moved with blinding speed, catching the arrow inches from her face. "You have spirit," she said, snapping the shaft between her fingers. "The king appreciates spirit in his subjects." Her lips pulled back to reveal needle-sharp fangs. "Or in his meals?" Ilara turned to flee, but invisible hands seemed to seize her, holding her in place as the vampire closed the distance between them. Cold fingers tangled in her hair, yanking her head back to expose her throat. "A pity," the vampire whispered, her breath like winter against Ilara's skin. "You might have made a passable addition to our ranks." But the king decreed no turnings tonight, only feeding. Ilara closed her eyes, her thoughts turning to her mother and Finn, praying they had reached the safety of the forest. She hoped they wouldn't return to find her body. She hoped they would run far from these mountains and never look back. The sharp points of fangs grazed her neck. "Lysandra!" The voice that cut through the night was deep, commanding, and colder than the winter wind. "Release her." The pressure on Ilara's throat vanished as the female vampire, Lysandra, stepped back immediately. Ilara stumbled forward, catching herself against a wooden post as she turned to face the newcomer. He stood like a monument to darkness itself, towering at least a head taller than any man Ilara had ever seen. His features might have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with the shadow of a beard, and lips pressed into a firm line. But it was his eyes that held Ilara transfixed, neither red like his soldiers, nor amber like Lysandra's, but a piercing, impossible silver that seemed to glow from within. The crown upon his brow left no doubt as to his identity. King Matthias Blackthorn dismounted from his midnight steed with fluid grace, the heavy black cloak around his shoulders billowing like smoke. "Your Majesty," Lysandra said, dropping into a low curtsy. "I was merely securing provisions for the army. I don't recall giving orders to toy with our food," he replied, his gaze never leaving Ilara's face. Something flickered across his features. Curiosity, perhaps, or surprise. Ilara's mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to obey, not out of the supernatural compulsion she'd felt before, but from a bone-deep understanding that flight was useless. Death stood before her, wearing a crown and the face of a fallen angel. "What is your name, girl?" the king asked, his voice unexpectedly quiet. "Why ask the names of cattle before slaughter?" Ilara surprised herself with her boldness, though she couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. The corner of the king's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Impertinence in the face of death, refreshing. He took a step closer, and Ilara caught his scent. Not the reek of decay she'd expected, but something like frost-covered pine and wood smoke. "I'll ask once more. Your name?" "Ilara Thorn," she answered, lifting her chin. If she was to die, she would do so with what dignity she could muster. "Ilara Thorn," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "Tell me, Ilara Thorn, why did you not flee with the others? My scouts report most of your village escaped into the southern woods." Hope flared in her chest at the confirmation her family had escaped. "I stayed to help those who couldn't move quickly," Nobility, he scoffed. A human virtue that has always puzzled me. Sacrificing oneself for the weak only ensures the survival of weakness. Behind him, the village was transforming into an inferno. Black Barrow was dying, house by house, scream by scream. Tears pricked at Ilara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Is there virtue in slaughtering innocents who pose no threat to you?" she asked. The king's silver eyes narrowed. "Innocents? Your council harbored rebels who attacked my supply wagons last moon. 3 of my soldiers died their final deaths because of your innocent village." Ilara's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? No, that's not possible." Something in her genuine bewilderment gave him pause. The king studied her face with unnerving intensity. "You didn't know? Our village trades in wool and timber. We're shepherds and woodcutters, not warriors." Matthias stepped closer, close enough that Ilara could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence that he had once been human, had once aged, before immortality claimed him. "Your council elder carries the symbol of the Silver Dawn, a human faction that has vowed to eradicate my kind. They've used your village as a base for months." Ilara thought of Uncle Thomas, of his insistence on standing to fight instead of fleeing, of the strangers who had begun appearing in the village over the summer, always in hushed conference with the council. "Even if that's true," she said, her voice steadying, "there are children here, elders, people who knew nothing of rebellion. Collateral damage in a war your kind began centuries ago," the king replied, though something like doubt flickered across his face. A distant shout drew his attention. One of his soldiers appeared at the end of the alley, dragging a struggling figure, a boy with dark hair. Ilara's heart stopped. "Finn!" Her brother's face was bloodied, his eyes wild with terror as he fought against his captor's grip. "Ilara! Run!" She lunged forward without thinking, only to be caught by Lysandra's iron grip. "Let him go!" she screamed, struggling against the vampire's hold. "He's just a child!" The king raised a hand, and his soldier halted, though he kept his grip on Finn. Matthias turned his silver gaze from brother to sister, his expression unreadable. "Please," Ilara begged, all pride forgotten. "Kill me if you must, but spare him. He's innocent in all this." "No one is innocent," Matthias said softly. Then, louder to his soldier, "Bring the boy here." The vampire pushed Finn forward until he stood before the king. Finn's legs trembled, but he stared up at Matthias with the same defiance Ilara had shown. "You claim he knows nothing of the Silver Dawn?" Matthias asked Ilara. "Nothing," she insisted. "We knew nothing." The king knelt, bringing himself eye-level with Finn. "Boy, what does your father do?" "He's dead," Finn spat. "2 winters past. Lumber accident." "And your mother?" "She weaves, mends, takes in washing." Matthias nodded slowly, then reached into Finn's coat pocket. The boy flinched but couldn't escape. The king withdrew his hand, now holding a small silver pendant shaped like a sunburst. Ilara's blood ran cold. She had never seen that pendant before. "An innocent child," Matthias said, dangling the Silver Dawn emblem before her eyes, "carrying the symbol of those who would see my entire race exterminated." His voice hardened. "Your brother is a courier for the rebels." "No," Ilara whispered, staring at Finn, whose face had drained of color. "Finn! Tell him he's wrong!" But her brother's silence spoke volumes. The king stood, tucking the pendant into his own cloak. "You truly didn't know," he said to Ilara, something like pity crossing his features. "Your brother has been lying to you both, it seems." Matthias turned to his soldier. "Take the boy to the camp. He has information we need." "No!" Ilara broke free from Lysandra's loosened grip and threw herself forward, catching the king's arm. "Please, your majesty, whatever he's done, he's still my brother. He's all the family I have left." The moment her hand touched him, something strange happened. The king went utterly still, his silver eyes widening fractionally as he looked down at her fingers clutching his sleeve. In the dancing firelight from the burning village, Ilara thought she saw the briefest flash of blue overtake the silver in his irises. Human eyes, in a face too perfect to be human. For 3 heartbeats, they stood frozen in that tableau. Then, with deliberate slowness, King Matthias removed her hand from his arm, but instead of casting it aside, he held it between his own. His touch was cold, but not the deathly chill she had expected. "Your brother has made his choices," he said, his voice lower, almost gentle. "But I find myself intrigued by you, Ilara Thorn." "My king?" Lysandra questioned, confusion evident in her tone. Matthias ignored her, still holding Ilara's gaze with his own. "I will spare your brother's life, for now, and yours as well." A humorless smile touched his lips. "In fact, I believe you'll be coming with us." "What?" Ilara and Lysandra spoke in unison. "This village has lost its usefulness," the king continued. "But you, Ilara Thorn, may yet serve a purpose." He released her hand and turned to his companions. "Secure the prisoners. We ride for Ravenspire before dawn." As his soldiers moved to obey, Matthias leaned closer to Ilara, his voice meant for her alone. "Your life for your brothers, Miss Thorn. A fair exchange, wouldn't you agree?" Ilara looked past him to where Finn was being bound, then to the burning remains of the only home she had ever known. Everything she had ever loved was either ash or prisoner. "Why?" she whispered. "Why keep either of us alive?" Something ancient and unreadable moved behind the king's silver eyes. "Perhaps," he said, "after 5 centuries of existence, even I can be surprised by something new." Before she could question him further, Lysandra appeared with shackles. The cold iron closed around Ilara's wrists as the last of Black Barrow's buildings collapsed into flames behind them. In the distance, the mountains stood silent, watching as the Blood King claimed his newest possession. Not the village he had destroyed, but the woman whose unexpected courage had awakened something long dormant in his immortal heart. Part 2. The journey to Ravenspire was a nightmare etched in frost and shadow. For 2 days, Ilara rode with her wrists bound, mounted behind one of the king's silent soldiers. Finn travelled separately, kept deliberately away from her in the sprawling caravan of the vampire army. Glimpses of his dark head among the prisoners were her only reassurance that he still lived. They travelled mostly by night, the undead soldiers seemingly invigorated by darkness, while their human captives stumbled with exhaustion. By day, great black tents were erected in forest clearings, far from villages or well-travelled roads. The vampires retreated to these shadowy sanctuaries, while humans, some prisoners, others willing servants, maintained watch. On the 3rd night, the mountains gave way to rolling foothills, and Ilara caught her first glimpse of Ravenspire in the distance. The castle stood like a jagged crown upon a solitary peak, its black towers silhouetted against the star-flecked sky. Hundreds of flickering lights, torches, or perhaps something more sinister, traced its imposing silhouette. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Ilara flinched. King Matthias had appeared beside her, mounted on his midnight stallion. In the nights since Black Barrow's destruction, he had been a distant figure at the head of the procession, issuing orders through Lysandra and other lieutenants. "I've seen prettier prison cells," Ilara replied, her voice hoarse from disuse. The corner of Matthias's mouth twitched, that almost smile she'd noticed before. 5 centuries old, built upon ruins twice that age. The mountain beneath is honeycombed with passages that run so deep they reach the very heart of the world. He studied her face, as if cataloguing her reaction. "Your new home, Miss Thorn. Not by choice. Few find themselves where they are by choice alone." His silver eyes reflected the starlight. "Destiny has as much hand in our fate as free will. Is that how you justify this?" Ilara gestured as best she could with her bound hands toward the line of prisoners. "Destiny made you slaughter innocent villages and take captives? You still cling to the illusion of innocence." Matthias's expression hardened. Every human in these mountains benefited from the Silver Dawn's protection. You paid tribute, whether you knew it or not. And what of children? Babes in arms? Were they paying tribute too? The king's jaw tightened. War has casualties, Miss Thorne. A concept your kind perfected long before my transformation. He nudged his horse forward. You'll find at Ravenspire that there are worse fates than being my prisoner. Like being your meal, she challenged to his retreating back. Matthias paused, half turning in his saddle. If I intended you for feeding, you'd already be dead. His eyes gleamed dangerously. Mind that sharp tongue when we arrive. Not all my court shares my restraint. The warning lingered in Ilara's mind as they made their final approach. The road wound upward through a dense forest of ancient pines, eventually giving way to a wide stone bridge spanning a chasm so deep she couldn't see its bottom. Beyond the bridge stood Ravenspire's massive gates, wrought iron twisted into the shapes of ravens taking flight. As they crossed the threshold into the outer bailey, Ilara felt a strange pressure descend upon her, as if the very air had grown heavier. The courtyard teemed with activity despite the late hour. Human servants, not prisoners, she noted, but people dressed in fine livery, moved with purpose alongside pale-skinned vampires of various ranks. Horses were led away, supplies unloaded, prisoners herded toward a squat stone building at the far side of the yard. "Where are they taking my brother?" Ilara demanded as a guard pulled her roughly from her mount. "The holding cells." Lysandra appeared, her amber eyes gleaming with undisguised dislike. "Where all rebels await questioning. He's just a boy, old enough to carry messages for those who would see us all destroyed." The female vampire seized Ilara's arm. "The king has commanded you be taken to the East Wing. I've assigned Mira to attend you." Before Ilara could protest further, she was marched away from the prisoner's path through a series of increasingly ornate corridors. Tapestries depicting ancient battles lined the walls, illuminated by strange blue flames that burned in iron sconces. The castle seemed a living entity, with shadows that moved oddly when observed directly and whispers that echoed from empty passages. After countless twists and turns, they reached a heavy wooden door banded with iron. Lysandra produced a key. "Your quarters. You may consider them comfortable or confining. The perspective matters little to me." She unlocked the door and pushed it open. "The king wishes you presentable tomorrow evening. Mira will help you prepare." "Presentable for what?" Ilara asked, stepping cautiously into the chamber. Lysandra's smile was cold as midwinter. "The feast celebrating our victorious return, of course. The king has decreed you shall attend as a guest." The door closed with a decisive thud, the lock engaging with a sound that echoed Ilara's sinking heart. Alone, she surveyed her prison, for prison it was, despite its comforts. The chamber was larger than the entire cottage she'd shared with her family, dominated by a canopied bed, draped in midnight blue velvet. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had seeped into her bones during their journey. A copper bathtub stood before it, steam rising invitingly from water that must have been drawn just before her arrival. Two tall, narrow windows looked out over the mountainside, offering a view of the forested valleys below. Ilara rushed to them, pressing her hands against the leaded glass panes. They didn't open, and even if they had, the sheer drop beyond would have made escape impossible. She sank to the window seat, emotions finally breaking through the numb shock that had carried her through the past days. Sobs racked her body as she thought of her mother, hopefully safe in the caves, of her home, reduced to cinders, of Finn, somewhere in the dungeons below. They say human tears contain a fraction of their soul's essence. Ilara's head snapped up. A girl stood near the chamber door, small and slender, with coppery hair and freckles scattered across her pale face like stars. She looked human, save for her eyes, violet as twilight, with pupils that reflected light like a cat's. "Half-born," the girl said, noting Ilara's scrutiny. "My mother was human. I'm Mira." She curtsied, the motion practiced but somewhat awkward. "I've been assigned as your handmaid." "Are you a prisoner too?" Ilara asked, wiping hastily at her tears. Mira tilted her head, considering. "No, not exactly. I was born here to one of the king's human concubines." A shadow crossed her face. "My mother died when I was small." "I'm sorry," Ilara said automatically. "Don't be, it was 27 years ago." Ilara blinked. The girl looked no older than 16. "Half-borns age slowly," Mira explained, moving to the bathtub. She trailed slender fingers through the water. "Still too hot for humans, I think. My mother always complained about vampire baths." She sprinkled dried herbs from a small pouch into the steaming water. "For the aches of your journey." Despite her circumstances, Ilara found herself drawn to the tub. Days of hard riding had left her muscles knotted and her skin grimy with dust from the road. "The king has requested you join him tomorrow evening," Mira continued, moving to a wardrobe and opening its doors to reveal several gowns. "These belonged to Lady Helena. You're of similar build." "Who is Lady Helena?" "Was. She displeased His Majesty last spring." Mira's tone made it clear the woman's fate had been unpleasant. "The blue would complement your coloring, I think." Ilara ignored the gowns. "I need to see my brother. The boy they brought in with the rebels. Impossible. The lower cells are restricted to all but the king's interrogators. He's 14 years old." "Age means little here," Mira said softly. "Capability and loyalty mean everything." She gestured to the bath again. "Please, the water grows cold, and you'll feel better for being clean." Recognizing the futility of argument, Ilara reluctantly allowed Mira to help her undress. The warm water was indeed a blessing, easing the aches of travel and washing away layers of grime. As she bathed, Mira busied herself lighting more candles and laying out night clothes. "Why did the king bring me here?" Ilara asked as she rose from the tub, accepting the linen cloth Mira offered. The half-born girl hesitated. "It's not my place to speculate on His Majesty's motives." "You must have some idea. Does he usually take prisoners from the villages he destroys?" "No." Mira handed her a silk nightgown so fine it felt like water in Ilara's hands. "Mostly he doesn't leave survivors." "Then why me?" Mira's violet eyes met hers directly. "There are rumors among the court. When the king returned, he summoned the royal alchemist immediately. They were closeted together for hours." "The alchemist? What does that mean?" "I don't know, but—" Mira glanced nervously at the door, then lowered her voice. "The king has been searching for something for nearly a century, something rare." Before Ilara could press for more details, a bell tolled somewhere in the depths of the castle. Mira straightened, her manner becoming more formal. "You should rest. Tomorrow we'll test your strength." She moved to the door. "I'll return at midday with food. Try to sleep. The windows are enchanted. They cannot be broken, nor the door forced. For your own safety, don't attempt escape." After Mira's departure, Ilara explored her chamber more thoroughly. Besides the main room, a small antechamber contained a copper wash basin and chamber pot. The wardrobe held a dozen gowns, all richly made but somber in color. A bookshelf near the bed offered volumes on history, poetry, and, curiously, herbalism, though all were written in languages she couldn't read. Exhaustion finally overcame her weariness, and she climbed into the massive bed. Despite her determination to remain alert, sleep claimed her almost instantly. She dreamed of ice and silver eyes, of blood falling like rain upon blackened soil. In the dream, she stood atop Ravenspire's highest tower as armies clashed below, human and vampire locked in eternal combat. Beside her stood a shadowed figure wearing a crown of twisted metal. "Balance," the figure whispered, its voice carried away by the howling wind. "The scales must be righted." Ilara woke with a gasp, sunlight streaming through the windows. For a disorienting moment, she expected to see her small bedroom in Black Barrow. Reality crashed back as her gaze met unfamiliar stone walls. A soft knock preceded Mira's entrance. The half-born girl carried a tray laden with bread, cheese, and fruit, along with a steaming pot that smelled of herbs. "You slept deeply," Mira observed, setting the tray on a small table. "No nightmares," Ilara frowned, the strange dream still clinging to her consciousness. "How did you know I might have nightmares?" "All new arrivals do." Mira poured a cup of the fragrant tea. "The castle affects human dreams, something about the old magic in the stones." As Ilara ate, Mira laid out the blue gown she'd suggested the previous night, along with undergarments, stockings, and delicate slippers. "The feast begins at moonrise," Mira explained. "Before that, the king wishes to speak with you privately." Ilara nearly choked on her bread. "Why? His Majesty doesn't explain his wishes to servants." Mira's tone was apologetic. "But I've been instructed to escort you to the observatory after you're dressed." The hours passed too quickly. Mira helped Ilara into the gown, midnight blue silk that clung to her waist before flowing to the floor in graceful folds. The neckline dipped lower than anything Ilara had worn before, revealing the curve of her collarbones and hinting at the swell of her breasts beneath. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, as Mira arranged her dark hair, weaving small silver beads through the intricate braids. "The court is particular about appearances." Mira secured the last braid. "Power here is displayed through beauty as much as force. I'm not trying to display power. I'm a prisoner, yet the king presents you as a guest." Mira's violet eyes were serious. "That distinction may be the only thing protecting you." When Mira finally pronounced her ready, the sun hung low on the horizon, painting the mountains in hues of amber and gold. They left the chamber, Ilara's slippers whispering against stone floors as they ascended staircase after staircase, climbing to what must be one of Ravenspire's highest towers. 2 vampire guards flanked a silver door at the top of the final spiral staircase. They straightened at Mira's approach. "The king's guest," Mira announced, her voice steadier than Ilara expected. The guards exchanged a glance, then one rapped sharply on the door. It swung open of its own accord, revealing a circular chamber ringed with windows that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding mountains. The observatory's domed ceiling was crafted of glass panels, set in an intricate metal framework, revealing the darkening sky above. "Enter!" The king's deep voice came from near the eastern window. Mira nudged Ilara forward, then remained in the doorway. "Shall I wait, Your Majesty?" "That won't be necessary." Matthias turned, and Ilara's breath caught. Gone was the battle-worn commander from their journey. The king wore formal attire, a black velvet doublet embroidered with silver thread in patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly, charcoal grey trousers and polished boots. A chain of office rested against his chest, supporting a pendant carved from some midnight dark stone. His crown still adorned his brow, but his dark hair had been neatly tied back, emphasizing the sharp planes of his face. He was, Ilara realized with unwelcome clarity, devastatingly handsome in the way that predatory creatures often are, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The door closed behind her, leaving them alone as the last light of day faded from the sky. "Miss Thorne?" Matthias inclined his head slightly. "You look rested." "Appearances can be deceiving." She met his silver gaze directly. "Where is my brother?" "Safe, for the moment." The king moved to a table set with maps and curious instruments. "Though his cooperation leaves much to be desired, he's frightened. He's stubborn, a family trait, it seems." Matthias lifted a crystal decanter, pouring deep red liquid into 2 glasses. He offered one to Ilara. "Wine, not blood, before you ask." She accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Why am I here?" "Direct. Another trait I find refreshing after centuries of courtly dissembling." He gestured to the window. "Look there, as the first stars appear." "What do you see?" Ilara reluctantly approached. The sun had set, darkness spreading across the valleys, while the highest peaks still caught the fading light. Stars winked into existence one by one in the deepening twilight. Mountains, trees. Your kingdom, I suppose. My kingdom, he echoed, standing close enough that she could feel the unnatural coolness radiating from his body. Do you know how old I am, Elara Thorne? 5 centuries, you said. 527 years. I was 32 when I was turned. His voice took on a distant quality. The world was different then. Humans still feared the dark as they should, and my kind ruled from the shadows rather than castles. Elara watched his profile, trying to imagine the human man he'd once been. What changed? Everything. Nothing. His silver eyes reflected the emerging stars. War between our kinds has been the only constant. The weapons evolve, from pitchforks to silver-tipped arrows to the alchemical horrors the Silver Dawn now deploys. But the hatred remains unchanged. And you think destroying villages will end that hatred? I think survival requires adaptation. He turned to face her fully. Which brings me to why you're here. Elara's heart quickened. I'm listening. When I touched you in Black Barrow, something unexpected occurred. Matthias set his untouched wine aside. I felt a resonance, a kind of recognition that I've encountered only once before, centuries ago. I don't understand. No, you wouldn't. He studied her with unsettling intensity. Tell me about your parents, your bloodline. There's nothing to tell? My father was a woodcutter. My mother is a weaver. Simple people from a simple village. And before that, your grandparents? Where did your family originate? Elara shrugged, uncomfortable with his focus. My father's people came from the eastern lowlands, generations ago. My mother's family has always been in the mountains, as far as I know. Your mother's line interests me particularly. Matthias reached toward her slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. His cold fingers brushed her cheek. May I? Before she could answer, he traced a line from her temple to her jaw. Where his skin met hers, Elara felt a strange, tingling warmth, contradicting the natural coldness of his touch. Matthias inhaled sharply, his silver eyes momentarily flaring blue. He stepped back abruptly, turning away. As I suspected. What was that? What did you do to me? Nothing. The reaction is natural and exceedingly rare. He paced to the opposite window. In 5 centuries, I've encountered only 3 humans with blood like yours. The last was over 100 years ago. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air crept along Elara's spine. My blood? Is that why I'm here? You're keeping me for feeding? Matthias laughed, the sound startlingly genuine. If I wished merely to consume you, there would have been no need for fine gowns and private conversations. His expression sobered. No, Elara Thorne, your blood is far too valuable to waste on momentary sustenance. The implication horrified her. You want to use me as some kind of breeding stock? To produce more humans with whatever quality my blood has? An interesting hypothesis, but no. He moved to the center of the observatory, where a complex apparatus of brass and silver stood beneath the glass dome. The alchemists call it stellar sanguinem, star blood. Humans born with a trace of ancient magic in their veins. Once such bloodlines were common, now they're nearly extinct, another casualty of the endless war between our kinds. He adjusted something on the apparatus, and it hummed to life, projecting patterns of light onto the domed ceiling. Constellations bloomed above them, more detailed than any natural view of the night sky. Those with stellar sanguinem can serve as conduits for certain magics, otherwise lost to time. Matthias turned to her, his expression more animated than she'd yet seen, including perhaps the means to end this eternal conflict. You expect me to help you win your war against humans? Elara backed away. I'd rather die. Not win, end. His gaze intensified. There was a time when humans and vampires coexisted, when transformation was a gift given only to those who proved worthy, not a weapon of mass creation to build armies. That balance was destroyed centuries ago, but with your help, it might be restored. Even if I believed you, why would I help the man who burned my village and imprisoned my brother? Because the alternative is far worse than you imagine. Matthias moved to a cabinet, retrieving a leather-bound journal. The Silver Dawn doesn't seek coexistence or even dominance. They pursue complete eradication of my kind, and any humans who associate with us. Their newest weapon doesn't distinguish between vampire and human once unleashed. He opened the journal to a page filled with sketches of ravaged bodies, their features contorted in agony. This was a village in the Western Territories 6 months ago, a settlement where humans and vampires had found a way to live together peacefully. The Silver Dawn released their purifying agent into the water supply. Ilara stared in horror at the drawings. What is it? A plague engineered to target the undead. It burns through our kind in hours, but it doesn't stop there. It mutates, infecting humans with a slower but equally fatal disease. He closed the journal. Your brother carries messages for people who would unleash this across the realm. Finn wouldn't knowingly participate in something so horrible. Perhaps not knowingly. Couriers are often kept ignorant of the content they deliver. Matthias set the journal aside. The choice before you is simple, if not easy. Help me find a way to neutralize this weapon and restore the ancient balance, or watch as both our races destroy each other. A knock at the observatory door interrupted them. Lysandra entered, her amber eyes flickering between king and human with obvious suspicion. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but the court assembles for the feast. Your presence is required. Of course. Matthias straightened, his manner shifting back to regal formality. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow, Miss Thorne. As Lysandra escorted them toward the great hall, Ilara's mind reeled with all she'd learned. Could she trust anything the Vampire King said? The horror of those sketches seemed genuine, yet he had still ordered the destruction of her village. And what of Finn, still imprisoned somewhere below? The feast awaited, with its unknown perils and pageantry. Beyond that, a choice that seemed impossible to make. As they approached the massive doors of the great hall, through which drifted music and the murmur of many voices, Ilara steeled herself for whatever came next. The Blood King had revealed his plans for her, but she sensed he still kept secrets. Whatever this stella sanguinum truly meant, one thing was certain. Her survival, and perhaps Finn's as well, depended on her discovering the whole truth behind Matthias Blackthorn's centuries-old quest for balance. The great hall of Ravenspire swallowed Ilara in its immensity. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow above, while massive chandeliers of twisted iron and crystal cast an ethereal glow over the assembled court. Vampires in formal attire conversed in clusters, their pale faces animated as they turned to observe the king's entrance, and more pointedly, the human woman at his side. Lysandra's fingers dug painfully into Ilara's arm as she guided her toward the high table. "Remember your place," the vampire whispered. "You walk among predators now." King Matthias ascended to his throne, a towering seat of black stone veined with silver. Lesser chairs flanked it, though none as imposing. With a gesture from the king, Ilara was directed to a seat at his right hand, a position of honor that sent visible ripples of surprise through the court. "Your Majesty honors the human unusually," observed an elderly vampire seated nearby. Despite his apparent age, his movements remained fluid as he reached for his goblet. His eyes were the color of aged amber, set deep in a face lined with centuries. "Lord Cassius," Matthias acknowledged. "Miss Thorne is a guest of particular interest." "Indeed." Cassius studied Ilara with unnerving intensity. "I haven't seen such positioning since the Veronay girl, 2 centuries past." A flicker of something, annoyance, warning, crossed Matthias's face. "Your memory serves you well, as always." Servants appeared, placing goblets before each guest. Ilara's contained wine, deep crimson, but clearly not blood. The vampire's chalices held a darker substance that glowed faintly in the candlelight. "Shall we toast your successful campaign, Your Majesty?" called a voice from down the table. a vampire woman with hair like spun silver and eyes as green as summer leaves. Matthias raised his goblet. To victory and vigilance, Lady Isolde. The court echoed his words, drinking deeply. Ilara raised her goblet to her lips without drinking, watching the assembled vampires over its rim. Their movements held an uncanny grace, their beauty both alluring and terrifying, yet some appeared more human than others. Lord Cassius, with his age-lined face, a few with rosy undertones to their pallor, suggesting recent feeding. "You observe keenly," Matthias noted quietly. "What do you see?" "Differences among your kind," Ilara replied, matching his low tone. "Age, perhaps? Or bloodlines?" A hint of approval crossed his features. "Both. Those turned centuries ago retain different qualities than more recent conversions, and lineage matters. A vampire created by a powerful sire inherits certain strengths." "And who was your sire?" she dared to ask. His silver eyes grew distant. "A queen from lands beyond the Eastern Sea. She sailed to these shores when Rome still stood as an empire." A sardonic smile touched his lips. "She found me dying on a battlefield, a knight with more courage than sense. She said such willful defiance of death deserved reward." Before Ilara could question him further, servants appeared with the first course. Roasted meats and vegetables for her, nothing for the vampires save their blood wine. "You don't eat food?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious, as all eyes watched her. "We can," Lord Cassius answered, "but it provides no sustenance. Merely an echo of remembered pleasure. An indulgence few bother with," added Lady Isolde, her green eyes glittering with amusement. "Like bedding humans for more than feeding." A tense silence followed her words. Ilara's cheeks burned as she realized the implication that Matthias had brought her here for carnal purposes. The king's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened around his goblet stem. "Lady Isolde," he said, his voice deceptively soft, "perhaps you'd favor us with tales of your recent diplomatic venture to the Western Covens? I understand their reception was less than enthusiastic." The silver-haired vampire's smile faltered. "Foreign covens lack vision, Your Majesty. They fail to recognize the importance of unity in these dangerous times. Or perhaps they recognize that unity forced through conquest breeds only resentment." This came from a vampire Ilara hadn't noticed before, a man with copper-dark skin and eyes like midnight, who stood against the far wall rather than sitting at the table. "Guardian Thorn," Matthias acknowledged, and Ilara startled at the familiar surname. "Your counsel, as always, comes unasked for, yet remains necessary," the man replied, stepping forward. As he moved into the light, Ilara saw a silver scar bisecting his left cheek, unusual for a vampire whose wounds typically healed without trace. "The Western Covens report increased Silver Dawn activity. While you conquered mountain villages, our true enemies advanced elsewhere." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Matthias's expression hardened. "We will discuss intelligence reports in council, not at feast." "As you wish." Guardian Thorn bowed slightly, his dark eyes finding Ilara's. Something in his gaze unsettled her, not threat, but recognition. Before she could process this, he had withdrawn to his position by the wall. The feast continued with increasingly strained conversation. Ilara picked at her food, acutely aware of being observed from all sides. When musicians began playing from a gallery above, she welcomed the distraction. The melody was unlike anything she'd heard in her village, haunting, complex, with harmonies that seemed to spiral through the great hall like living things. "Mountain folk favor simpler tunes, I imagine," Lord Cassius commented, noting her attention to the music. "Beauty can be found in simplicity and complexity alike," Ilara answered, surprising herself with her boldness. The old vampire chuckled. "Well said, child. I was a musician myself in my first life, 7 centuries ago, playing for courts far less civilized than this one." 7 centuries. Ilara couldn't hide her astonishment. "How many of you are so old?" "Few," Matthias answered. The oldest among us tend to meet violent ends or choose final death after centuries of existence. Immortality weighs heavily on the spirit. Yet you persist, she observed. I have unfinished work. His silver eyes met hers, and again she felt that strange connection between them, like a thread pulled taut across the space that separated their worlds. The moment shattered as the great hall's doors burst open. A vampire soldier staggered in, his armor rent and bloody, his face ashen even for his kind. "Your Majesty," he gasped, falling to one knee before the high table. "The western garrison, attacked, the weapon—" Matthias was on his feet instantly. "When?" "2 hours past sunset. I rode ahead of the survivors." The soldier's voice cracked with strain. It was as before, but worse. Humans and vampires alike, consumed by fire from within. The court erupted in horrified exclamations. Matthias raised a hand, commanding silence. "How many were at the garrison?" he demanded. 40 of our kind, 60 human allies." The messenger bowed his head. "Perhaps 10 escaped. The rest, the screaming, sire." The screaming wouldn't stop. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face as she recalled the journal sketches Matthias had shown her. 90 souls, gone in a night. "Quarantine procedures are in effect," the soldier continued. "The survivors await your orders at the Blackwater checkpoint." Matthias turned to his court, his face a mask of controlled fury. "The council chamber. Now." His gaze fell on Ilara. "You as well, Miss Thorne. What I showed you earlier was but a prelude to this." Before she could respond, Lysandra was at her side, escorting her from the great hall. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by grim purpose, as the vampire nobles followed their king. Ilara glimpsed Guardian Thorne among them, his dark eyes finding hers briefly before the crowd separated them. The council chamber proved smaller than the great hall, but no less imposing. A massive round table of polished obsidian dominated the space, its surface etched with a map of the realm. Matthias took position at the northern point, while his nobles arranged themselves around the circumference. Ilara was placed slightly behind the king, neither fully included nor excluded from the proceedings. "Reports in full," Matthias commanded. Various councillors spoke in turn, describing increasing Silver Dawn activity across the kingdom. Supply routes disrupted, isolated vampires found destroyed, human settlements that traded with vampires suffering mysterious illnesses. The Western garrison attack represented an escalation, using what they called the Purifier, the plague weapon Matthias had described. "They grow bolder," Lady Isolde concluded. This was not a remote outpost, but a major stronghold. "The message is clear. Nowhere is safe." "What of our captive rebels?" asked a gaunt vampire Ilara hadn't seen at the feast. "Has interrogation yielded anything of use?" Lysandra straightened. "Most know nothing beyond their immediate orders. However, the boy courier has proven resilient to questioning." Ilara's heart seized. "What have you done to my brother?" she demanded, forgetting her place. All eyes turned to her. Matthias didn't silence her as she expected, instead regarding her with something like sympathy. "Standard interrogation only," he assured her. "Unlike your Silver Dawn allies, we don't torture children, regardless of the intelligence they might possess." "He's just a boy," Ilara insisted. "Whatever he carried, he couldn't have known its significance." "Perhaps not," Guardian Thorne interjected, "but he might have observed details unwittingly, bases, faces, routines that could help us locate Silver Dawn leadership." Matthias nodded. "Bring the boy to us. Miss Thorne's presence may encourage his cooperation." As a guard departed to fetch Finn, the council continued discussing defensive measures. Ilara half listened, her thoughts centered on her brother. Had he truly been involved with people capable of such horrors, or was he merely a pawn, exploited for his youth and presumed innocence? Minutes later, the doors opened again. Finn entered, flanked by 2 guards. He appeared uninjured but exhausted, his young face hollow with fear and defiance. When he saw Ilara, his eyes widened in shock. Ilara, his voice cracked. They said you were... He stopped, staring at her fine gown, her place near the king. I'm alive, Finn, she said quickly. I'm unharmed. Suspicion clouded his features. What did they do to you? Why are you dressed like one of them? Matthias rose from his seat, towering over the boy. Your sister has been treated as an honored guest while you played courier to mass murderers. Finn flinched but held his ground. I don't know what you're talking about. The Western garrison, Guardian Thorn said, his deep voice gentle despite the gravity of his words. 90 souls, vampire and human alike, died in agony tonight. The Silver Dawn used the same weapon your messages helped coordinate. Horror flickered across Finn's face before he mastered it. I was just supposed to deliver the packages. What packages? Ilara asked, moving toward him despite the guard's warning stance. Finn, please. Whatever you know could save lives. Human lives, too. Her brother's resolve visibly wavered as he looked into her eyes. They told me it was medicine, he whispered, for fighting the vampire plague. They said vampires were making humans sick, and the packages contained the cure. Who told you this? Matthias demanded. Finn hesitated, then deflated. Uncle Thomas at first, then the others who came through the village. They had a symbol, a sun with rays like silver spears. The Silver Dawn's inner circle, Lord Cassius murmured. Where did you take these packages? Guardian Thorn pressed. Different places, usually dead drops in the forest or abandoned buildings. Finn swallowed hard. But the last one, the big one, they made me memorize directions to their main camp. It's hidden in the Mistfall Valley, beneath the ruins of the old abbey. The vampires exchanged significant looks. Matthias straightened, purpose radiating from his imposing figure. Prepare for immediate deployment, he ordered. Lord Cassius, you'll coordinate from Ravenspire. Lady Isolde, gather your rangers. Guardian Thorn, your shadow walkers will lead the approach. As the council burst into activity, Matthias turned to Ilara and Finn. You've done well, boy. For this service, I grant you protected status. Finn looked bewildered. What does that mean? It means you'll be treated as a ward of the crown, not a prisoner. The king's silver eyes softened fractionally. Your sister has much to explain to you. I suggest you listen carefully. Guards escorted them to a small antechamber adjoining the council room. As the door closed behind them, Finn turned to Ilara with accusation written across his features. What happened to you? Why are you helping them? His voice trembled. These are monsters, Ilara. They destroyed our home. And the people you carried packages for slaughtered 90 innocents tonight. Ilara sank into a chair, suddenly bone-weary. The world isn't as simple as we thought, Finn. Over the next hour, she told him everything. The king's explanation of Stella Sanguinem, the plague weapon, the ancient balance now destroyed. Finn listened with growing horror and confusion. So you're special somehow. Your blood, according to the king. Ilara rubbed her temples. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I saw the evidence of that weapon with my own eyes, and now hundreds more will die if the Silver Dawn isn't stopped. Finn's youthful face had aged years in days. I never knew what was in those packages. I swear it, Ilara. Uncle Thomas said I was helping protect our people. I believe you. She took his hands in hers. But we've been caught in something much bigger and older than ourselves. Their conversation was interrupted as the door opened again. Guardian Thorn entered, now dressed in close-fitting armor of midnight blue, with various weapons strapped to his tall frame. The king requests your presence, Miss Thorn, he said formally. Alone. Finn stiffened protectively. Why? Because her blood may be our only defense against what we'll face tonight. The Guardian's dark eyes held Ilara's steadily. The king believes you can help create a shield against the Purifier. How? Ilara asked, rising to her feet. That's for him to explain. Guardian Thorn hesitated, then added more softly, Your brother will be safe here. You have my word. Something in his manner, a sincerity that felt out of place in Ravenspire's court of secrets, convinced her. With a reassuring squeeze of Finn's hand, she followed the Guardian back into the council chamber, now emptied save for Matthias and a slight, bespectacled vampire bent over the table. "Alchemist Voss has prepared what we discussed," Matthias said without preamble. "But we need your willing participation." The alchemist looked up, adjusting his spectacles with ink-stained fingers. "Fascinating, truly fascinating," he murmured, examining Ilara with clinical interest. "A natural stella sanguinem in this age. I'd thought the bloodlines extinct." "What exactly do you need from me?" Ilara asked warily. Matthias gestured to an array of equipment on the table. Glass vials, silver instruments, and a small golden bowl inscribed with symbols she didn't recognize. "A few drops of your blood, freely given," he explained. "Combined with alchemical elements and my own blood, it may create a protective tincture against the purifier." "May?" Guardian Thorn questioned. "You risk much on theory, my king." "Theory built on precedent," Matthias countered. "The Veronais girl's blood provided the foundation for this work 2 centuries ago. With Miss Thorne's contribution, we can complete it." "And if I refuse?" Ilara asked. Matthias's silver eyes held hers. "Then I and my forces will still confront the Silver Dawn, but with significantly less chance of survival. And should we fail, the plague will spread until it consumes every vampire in this realm and countless humans in the process." The weight of his words settled over her. "Lives in the balance, hanging on her decision." How had she come to this moment, so far from her quiet life in Black Barrow? "If I help you," she said slowly, "you must promise something in return. Name it. Whatever happens tonight, Finn goes free. Back to our mother, with provisions and protection." Matthias considered this. "Agreed. With one condition. He must never again have contact with the Silver Dawn." "Done." Ilara extended her hand toward the alchemist. "How much blood do you need?" Voss produced a small silver knife. 7 drops, no more." As Ilara positioned her finger above the golden bowl, Guardian Thorn stepped closer. "Miss Thorn," he said quietly, "there's something you should know before you proceed." Matthias shot him a warning glance, but the Guardian continued. "The king hasn't told you everything about Stella Sanguinem, or about why your blood calls to his in particular." "Guardian," Matthias growled, "this is not the time. If she's to risk herself, she deserves the truth." Guardian Thorn's dark eyes never left Ilara's. "Ask him about the prophecy. Ask him why he really spared you in Black Barrow." Ilara looked between them, feeling the tension crackle like lightning before a storm. "What prophecy?" "We have no time for this," Matthias snapped. "Every moment we delay costs lives." "Then tell me quickly," Ilara insisted, withdrawing her hand from above the bowl. "What aren't you telling me?" The king's face hardened, then abruptly softened with something like resignation. "The prophecy of the blood and the star," he said quietly. "A covenant made at the dawn of my kind's creation, foretelling an end to the eternal war, but at great cost to both sides." "What cost?" Ilara whispered. Matthias's silver eyes met hers, ancient and haunted. "The union of opposites, vampire king and star-blooded human, will bring either salvation or destruction to both races. One cannot survive without the other's sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Cold dread washed through her. "You mean death?" "Not necessarily," Guardian Thorn interjected. "The prophecy speaks of blood freely given and freely taken. Throughout our history, such words have been interpreted many ways. But you believe I'm this prophesied person?" Ilara struggled to process the implications. "Based on what? The reaction when we touch?" "That and other signs." Matthias stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "The timing of your discovery, as our races edge toward mutual annihilation. The strength of the resonance between us, stronger than any I've encountered. The dreams. You've had them too?" Ilara gasped, remembering her vision of standing beside a crowned figure as armies clashed below. The king's expression confirmed her suspicion. From the moment I spared your life in Black Barrow." Guardian Thorn watched their exchange with intense focus. "The prophecy speaks of choice, Your Majesty. Remember that part as well." "There is always choice," Matthias agreed, his gaze still locked with Ilara's, "even when all paths lead to sacrifice of some kind." Outside, a horn sounded, the signal for departure. The king's forces were assembled, ready to march on the Silver Dawn's hidden base. "We have no more time," Matthias said. "Will you help us, Ilara Thorn, knowing what may be asked of you in the end?" Ilara stood at the precipice of a decision that transcended her simple life, her small concerns. Before her lay two paths: refuse and possibly doom countless innocents, or consent and step fully into a destiny she neither wanted nor understood. "I will help you tonight," she said finally, "but I make no promises beyond that." She extended her hand again. The silver knife glinted in the candlelight as the alchemist made a small cut on her fingertip. 7 drops of blood, bright, ordinary-looking despite their supposed power, fell into the golden bowl. Matthias added his own blood, darker and thicker than human vitae. Alchemist Voss worked quickly, combining their blood with powders and liquids from his array of vials. The mixture began to glow with soft golden light, illuminating the tense faces gathered around the table. "It's working," Voss breathed, his scholarly detachment giving way to wonder. The combined blood rose from the bowl of its own accord, forming a swirling sphere that pulsed within a light. As they watched, it separated into dozens of smaller droplets, each hardening into a translucent crimson bead. "Blood pearls," Guardian Thorn murmured. "I've only heard of them in ancient texts." "Each contains protection against the purifier," Matthias explained, gathering the beads into a small pouch. "Enough for my elite guard, at least." "And for yourself?" Ilara asked. The king's smile held no humor. "As the prophecy suggests, your blood and mine are already connected. I need no additional protection." Before she could question this assertion, the council chamber doors swung open. Lady Isolde entered, now clad in armor like Guardian Thorns. "The army awaits, Your Majesty," she announced. "Dawn is 6 hours away. If we are to reach Mistfall Valley under cover of darkness, we must depart immediately." Matthias nodded, then turned to Ilara. "Return to your chambers. Remain with your brother. Whatever happens tonight will determine much of our future course." "You're leaving me behind?" Ilara asked, surprised to find herself almost disappointed. "This battle is not yours to fight." The king's expression softened fractionally. "Not yet." Guardian Thorn approached, bowing slightly to Ilara. "I will personally ensure your brother's safety during our absence, and yours as well." "You're not going with them?" she asked. "My place is here, protecting Ravenspire in the king's absence." Something unspoken passed between Guardian and King, a private communication Ilara couldn't decipher. As the company prepared to depart, Matthias drew Ilara aside one last time. His voice dropped to ensure only she could hear. "If I don't return," he said quietly, "seek out the Guardian. He knows paths through the mountains that can take you and your brother to safety." "You expect to fail?" Ilara searched his face, finding genuine concern beneath his regal mask. "I expect nothing and prepare for everything." His cold fingers brushed hers briefly. "But know this, Ilara Thorn. Whether the prophecy speaks truth or lies, meeting you has awakened something I thought long dead. For that alone, I would see you safely beyond this conflict." Before she could respond, he was gone, sweeping from the chamber with Lady Isolde and his war council in his wake. The sudden absence of his commanding presence left the room feeling strangely empty. Guardian Thorn remained, watching her with those penetrating dark eyes. "Come," he said gently. "Your brother waits, and the night grows long." As he escorted her back toward her chambers, Ilara found her thoughts torn between concern for Finn and an unexpected worry for Matthias Blackthorn, the vampire king who had destroyed her village, yet might be fighting to save her world. The prophecy's words echoed in her mind. Blood and star, sacrifice and salvation. What would dawn bring, victory or defeat? And if Matthias returned triumphant, what then would he ask of her? Ilara shivered, sensing that tonight's battle was merely the opening move in a game far larger and more dangerous than she had yet comprehended. The true test and the true sacrifice still awaited. Dawn broke over Ravenspire in shades of crimson and gold, yet no triumphant horns announced the king's return. Ilara stood at her chamber window, watching the eastern sky with hollow eyes. She had not slept. How could she, with armies clashing in the night and prophecies hanging over her head like the executioner's blade? Finn dozed fitfully in a chair by the fire, his young face troubled even in sleep. After Guardian Thorn had left them, called away on some urgent matter hours ago, brother and sister had talked until exhaustion claimed the boy. Ilara had explained everything. The Stella Sanguinem, the prophecy, the choice that might soon face her. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself," Finn had promised fiercely, but they both knew such decisions might not be theirs to make. A soft knock interrupted her vigil. Mira entered, her violet eyes shadowed with concern. "Any word?" Ilara asked immediately. The half-born girl shook her head. "Nothing certain. Rumors fly through the castle like bats. Victory, defeat, the king fallen, the king triumphant." She set down a tray of bread and fruit. "Guardian Thorn requests your presence in the observatory. Both of you." Finn stirred at her voice, blinking sleep from his eyes. "Is it over?" "We don't know," Ilara answered, helping him to his feet, "but we're summoned." They followed Mira through Ravenspire's labyrinthine corridors. The castle felt strangely empty, most of its defenders having ridden with Matthias to Mistfall Valley. Those who remained moved with tense purpose, casting curious glances at the human siblings as they passed. The observatory's silver door stood open. Inside, Guardian Thorn bent over a table strewn with maps and missives. He straightened as they entered, his dark eyes grave. "We've received scattered reports," he said without preamble. "The Silver Dawn's stronghold was destroyed, but at great cost. The king's forces were ambushed en route. They triggered the very weapon they sought to prevent." Ilara's heart contracted painfully. "The purifier?" "Yes. Released as a mist throughout the valley." The Guardian's voice remained steady, but Ilara detected strain beneath his composure. "Most of our army was protected by the blood pearls, but the human settlements nearby," he trailed off, the implication clear. "And the king?" Finn asked, surprising both Ilara and the Guardian. Thorn's expression softened slightly. "No confirmed report. Lady Isolde returned with the vanguard at first light, grievously wounded. She claims the king led a final charge into the heart of the abbey after the purifier was deployed." "He went after the source," Ilara murmured, remembering Matthias's single-minded determination. "To destroy it completely. At the likely cost of his life," Guardian Thorn agreed. "Few could survive such concentrated exposure, even with your blood's protection." Finn glanced between them. "Then it's over? The Silver Dawn is defeated?" "Not entirely. Their leadership escaped through underground passages. We captured only their alchemists and foot soldiers." The Guardian rolled up a map with decisive movements. "But their weapon is destroyed, and their main base with it. It will take them years to recover such capabilities." Ilara sank into a chair, emotions warring within her. Relief at the Silver Dawn's setback mingled with unexpected grief at the thought of Matthias fallen. Despite everything, the destruction of her village, her captivity, the tangled prophecy, she had glimpsed something in the Vampire King worth saving. A vision of balance that transcended the endless cycle of revenge. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," said a voice from the doorway, "we rebuild." Ilara whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. King Matthias Blackthorn stood there, though barely recognizable from the imposing figure who had departed the previous night. His armor was charred and broken, his face streaked with ash and a substance that gleamed silver in the morning light. One arm hung limply at his side, the flesh visibly blackened even beneath his ruined sleeve. "My king!" Guardian Thorn moved forward, obvious relief breaking through his stoic demeanor. "We feared you lost." "Not yet, old friend." Matthias's silver eyes found Ilara's, and something passed between them. Recognition, connection, the thread of prophecy pulling taut. Though it was a near thing. He staggered slightly, and Ilara rose without thinking, crossing to support his uninjured side. The contact sent that now familiar warmth coursing through her, stronger than before. "You need blood to heal," Guardian Thorn said, already moving toward the door. "I'll summon—" "No!" Matthias's command stopped him. "Ordinary feeding won't heal these wounds. The purifier was evolved from previous versions, more potent." Ilara helped him to a chair, noticing with alarm how the silver substance seemed to spread beneath his skin like veins of quicksilver. "What is happening to you?" "The weapon's final form," he explained, his voice strained. "Designed specifically to target the oldest of our kind, those created by the ancients." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "They found my weakness at last. There must be a cure." Finn spoke up unexpectedly. "The Silver Dawn alchemists—" "Captured or dead," Matthias confirmed, "but their knowledge wasn't complete. The weapon was designed to be irreversible." Guardian Thorn's expression darkened. "You knew this might happen, yet you charged into the thickest concentration." "I knew what the prophecy required." The king's gaze returned to Ilara. "Blood, freely given, freely taken. The choice must be hers, Thorn." Understanding dawned on the Guardian's face, followed quickly by concern. "The texts are unclear, ambiguous. We cannot be certain." "What choice?" Ilara interrupted, looking between them. "What aren't you telling me?" Matthias straightened with visible effort. "The prophecy's completion. To end the war permanently, to restore the balance, a sacrifice is indeed required." He held her gaze steadily. "But not death. Transformation." "Transformation," she repeated slowly. "You want to turn me into a vampire. Not merely turn you. The Stella Sanguinum makes you unique." He gestured to his silver-veined arm. "My blood carries the oldest magic of our kind. Yours carries the last pure strain of human magic. United, they could create something new, a bridge between our races." "A hybrid," Guardian Thorn elaborated. "Neither fully vampire nor fully human. The texts speak of such a being as the harbinger of a new age." Finn stepped protectively closer to his sister. "You're dying, so you want to use Ilara to save yourself?" "No, boy." Despite his weakened state, Matthias's voice carried authority. "My death is certain either way. The poison has reached too deeply. But in my final hours, I can pass my ancient lineage to her, if she chooses to accept it." "And if I don't?" Ilara asked, her mind reeling. "Then I die. The prophecy remains unfulfilled, and perhaps in another 5 centuries, another pair will face this same choice." His silver eyes dulled with pain. "The cycle continues." Guardian Thorn moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a leather-bound tome that looked ancient beyond reckoning. "This contains the original prophecy, recorded before the first great vampire wars." He placed it on the table before Ilara. "Read it yourself. The choice must be informed." The text was written in an archaic script, but somehow Ilara found she could understand it, the words seeming to transform as her eyes passed over them. "When blood and star unite by choice, not force, the ancient balance shall find restoration. What was sundered shall be whole once more. Through sacrifice freely offered, freely accepted, neither human nor vampire, but both and neither, the first of a new kind, shall bridge the chasm, and in this union shall both races find salvation. Or mutual destruction, should the heart prove false." Ilara looked up from the text, meeting Matthias's gaze. "You've known this since Black Barrow." "Since you first touched me." "I suspected," he corrected. I've searched for centuries, finding only fragments of the Stella Sanguinum lineage. None were the one prophesied. A spasm of pain crossed his features as more silver lines spread visibly up his neck. Until you. How would this work? She asked, part of her unable to believe she was even considering it. A blood exchange, but more complete than ordinary turning, Guardian Thorn explained. The king would pass not just the vampire essence, but his entire lineage, his memories, his power, his very self. And what happens to him? Finn demanded. Final death, Matthias answered simply. But perhaps some echo of me would live on in Ilara, and I would become what exactly? Something new. The prophecy is unclear on specifics. The king's voice softened. You would retain your humanity while gaining vampiric abilities, neither bound by the sun nor slave to bloodthirst, but possessing aspects of both races. The bridge, Ilara whispered, recalling her dream of standing atop Ravenspire as armies clashed below. Yes. Matthias leaned forward, urgency entering his tone as more silver lines crept across his face. With such a being to lead them, to show that coexistence is possible, both races might finally end this eternal war. Guardian Thorn placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder. The choice must be yours, freely made, but know that if you accept, you can never return to your old life. Finn grasped her other arm. Ilara, you can't. It's too much to ask. What about you? She asked her brother. What about Mother? The king's word stands, Guardian Thorn assured her. Regardless of your choice, your family will be protected. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. How had she come to this moment, this impossible choice? Just days ago, she had been a simple village girl with simple dreams. Now she stood at a crossroads of history, with the fate of two races potentially in her hands. When she opened her eyes again, she found Matthias watching her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Hope mingled with something deeper, more personal. In these past days, he said quietly, you've shown more courage and compassion than I've witnessed in centuries of existence. If anyone could bear this burden, it would be you, Ilara Thorn. Why me, she whispered, out of all the humans in your kingdom? The prophecy chose you, your bloodline, your spirit. His voice grew softer still, and perhaps something beyond reason or prophecy drew me to you that night in Black Barrow, something I had forgotten could exist. Understanding dawned in Ilara's heart. Beyond the politics, beyond the ancient magic and prophecies, Matthias Blackthorn, the feared Blood King, had recognized in her a kindred soul. Someone who, like him, would sacrifice for those she loved. Someone who could see beyond the boundaries that divided their kinds. If I agree, she said slowly, I want conditions. Name them. Despite his weakening state, Matthias straightened regally. First, reparations for Black Barrow and the other villages destroyed in your campaign. Second, amnesty for all human prisoners taken, including former Silver Dawn members willing to renounce violence. Her voice gained strength as she continued. Third, a council of both races to govern jointly, with equal power. A ghost of a smile touched Matthias's lips, already thinking like a ruler. Not a ruler, Ilara corrected. A bridge. So you accept? Guardian Thorn asked. Ilara looked at Finn, seeing the fear and confusion in her brother's young face. I don't want to leave you, she told him softly. You won't, Finn said, his expression resolving into determined acceptance beyond his years. Wherever you go, whatever you become, you're still my sister. His voice broke slightly. And I think you could make things better. For everyone. She embraced him tightly, then turned back to Matthias. The silver veins had now spread across most of his visible skin, giving him an otherworldly appearance. Half flesh, half metal. How much time do you have? She asked. Hours at most, he answered. The ritual should begin soon, if you're certain. Ilara took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a great precipice. I accept, she said. the words seeming to echo with finality. For peace, for balance. Matthias nodded once, then spoke to Guardian Thorn. Prepare the sanctum. The boy should remain here. I want to be with her, Finn protested. The ritual is not for mortal eyes, Matthias said, not unkindly. But I swear by whatever honor I still possess, your sister will return to you. Guardian Thorn escorted them deep beneath Ravenspire, into chambers Ilara had not known existed. The walls were carved directly from the mountain's heart, glittering with veins of crystal that emitted a soft, pulsing light. At the center of the largest chamber lay a circular pool filled with liquid that shimmered like quicksilver. The lifeblood of the mountain, Matthias explained, as Thorn helped him remove his ruined armor. A natural wellspring of magic older than vampires or humans. Ilara watched nervously as Guardian Thorn arranged various items around the pool's edge. Candles of black wax, small bowls of herbs, and a ceremonial dagger with a blade that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I will begin the ritual and leave before its completion, Thorn explained. What passes between you must occur without witnesses. As he worked, Matthias motioned Ilara closer. Are you afraid? He asked softly. Yes, she admitted. But not of you. Of failing. Of not being strong enough for what comes after. You are stronger than you know. His silver-veined hand brushed hers. I have lived over 5 centuries, Ilara Thorn, and met few souls, human or vampire, with your quiet courage. Guardian Thorn completed his preparations and lit the black candles. Their flames burned blue, casting eerie shadows across the crystalline walls. He spoke words in a language Ilara didn't recognize, yet somehow understood, an invocation to powers older than time, witnesses to the covenant, about to be sealed. It is ready, he said finally, bowing to them both. May the prophecy bring light from darkness. After he departed, Ilara stood uncertainly at the pool's edge. Matthias had removed his ruined shirt, revealing the full extent of the silver corruption spreading through his body. Despite this, he moved with dignity as he stepped into the shimmering liquid, which rose only to his knees. Come, he beckoned, extending his hand. Ilara removed her slippers and the outer layer of her gown, then took his hand and joined him in the pool. The liquid felt neither hot nor cold, but alive somehow, pulsing with ancient rhythms. What do I do? She whispered. Give yourself to the moment, Matthias answered, drawing her closer until they stood chest to chest in the center of the pool. The magic will guide us. He took the ceremonial dagger and with a swift motion cut his palm. Silver-infused blood welled from the wound, dripping into the shimmering liquid around them. Ripples spread outward, carrying motes of light like tiny stars. Blood freely given, he intoned, offering the dagger to her. Ilara took it with trembling hands and made a similar cut across her own palm. Crimson droplets joined his in the pool, creating a spiral pattern where they met and merged. Blood freely taken, she responded, instinctively knowing the words. Matthias clasped her bleeding hand in his, their blood mingling as the pool around them began to glow more intensely. The silver veins covering his body pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. I, Matthias Blackthorn, last of the ancient line, freely offer my essence, my power, my very being, he spoke, his voice resonating through the chamber. May what I was live on in a new form, a bridge between worlds. I, Ilara Thorn, of the Stella Sanguinum, freely accept this gift and burden, she replied, the words coming from somewhere beyond conscious thought. May what I become honor the sacrifice that creates it. The light from the pool intensified until it enveloped them completely. Matthias pulled her closer still, one hand cradling the back of her head. There is one last exchange, he murmured, his lips near her ear. Remember me, Ilara. Not as the Blood King, but as I might have been in another life. Before she could respond, he tilted her head and bit gently into her throat. Unlike the violent feeding she had feared in Black Barrow, this felt like a caress, intimate, sacred. She gasped as warmth spread from the contact point, flowing through her veins like liquid sunlight. As Matthias drew her blood, the silver corruption flowed from his body into the pool, replaced by a golden luminescence that spread through both their forms. Ilara felt his essence entering her, memories of centuries lived, power beyond human comprehension, and beneath it all a loneliness that spanned ages. Instinctively, she turned her head and pressed her lips to his throat, completing the circle. His blood tasted of starlight and ancient forests, of winter nights and summer storms, the distilled experience of 5 centuries in a single draught. The chamber erupted in blinding light as their essences merged completely. Ilara felt herself dissolving and reforming, human and vampire, mortal and immortal, past and future fusing into something entirely new. Matthias's physical form began to fade, becoming translucent as his essence transferred fully to her. In their final moments of connection, his thoughts brushed against her consciousness. Lead them better than I did. Find the balance I could not. And beneath those thoughts, unspoken but unmistakable, in another life, in another time, I could have loved you as you deserved. Then he was gone, dissolved into light that Ilara's transformed body absorbed like a flower drinking sunlight. She fell to her knees in the now still pool, gasping as new senses awakened within her, the ability to hear heartbeats from rooms away, to see colors beyond the human spectrum, to feel the very pulse of the mountain beneath her. Yet she remained herself, Ilara Thorne, the shepherd's daughter from Black Barrow. Her heart still beat, slower but steady. Her lungs still craved air. Her soul remained her own, though now it contained echoes of another. When she finally rose and stepped from the pool, she caught her reflection in the crystalline wall. Her eyes now held flecks of silver among their natural color, and her skin glowed with subtle luminescence. Neither human nor vampire, but something new. The bridge the prophecy had foretold. I will remember, she promised the empty chamber, knowing that somewhere beyond mortal understanding, Matthias Blackthorne heard her vow. And I will build what you envisioned. Days later, Ilara stood on Ravenspire's highest tower, the very spot from her prophetic dream, with Finn and Guardian Thorn at her side. Below, the castle courtyard filled with an unprecedented gathering, vampires and humans, standing together without fear for perhaps the first time in centuries. Are you ready? Guardian Thorn asked softly. Ilara nodded, feeling Matthias's memories guiding her, his knowledge of statecraft and diplomacy merging with her natural compassion. The people await their queen, Thorn continued, the first of her kind. Not queen, Ilara corrected, echoing her words from days before. Guardian, protector, bridge. She stepped forward to address the assembled crowd, her voice carrying with newfound authority. As she spoke of healing, of balance restored and new beginnings, she felt Matthias's presence like a whisper in her mind, not controlling, but supporting. A partnership that transcended death itself. The prophecy had demanded sacrifice, but had given something precious in return. Hope for a future where blood need not be spilled in endless war, where differences became strength rather than division. And if, in the quiet hours before dawn, Ilara sometimes spoke to a presence only she could sense, the echo of a king who had found redemption in his final choice, none would ever know save the ancient stones of Ravenspire, standing witness to the beginning of a new age.